So, from my understanding, you started your career as a graduate of the Osher Research Fellowship in Integrative Medicine. You went on to become a primary doctor and a hospitalist. You explored acupuncture research and you pursued biological engineering at MIT, among other things. And it would be great to hear a little bit more about your trajectory through these different kind of pathways. And from your vantage point now, what's your view on the arc of integrative medicine that you've seen as it's evolved over the course of your career?
Well, that's a great question. I finished my residency at University of Michigan, and after I did that, so that was back in 1990, 97 to 2000. It was an internal medicine residency. I wanted to go into pulmonary and critical care, didn't actually get into the fellowship, and I was really struggling because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I ended up doing hospital medicine for a few years at MGH. But I really was had the idea of having a whole systems understanding of the human body really appealed to me. And I felt that some of the traditional medical arts, such as traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, some of those systems really had some answers that conventional medicine didn't. So that's why I applied to the Integrative Medicine Fellowship at Harvard and did 3 years there. And I decided to focus on acupuncture, primarily to first understand sort of the fundamental principles underlying traditional Chinese medicine, like the 5 elements theory, the yin yang theories, etc. But then I quickly became really interested in understanding what the acupuncture points and meridians were. And what is it that, sort of like, how do these systems work? Why does the needle at one point have a whole body effect, theoretically? And so that really got me into sort of getting into the details of what makes an acupuncture point and meridian. And there was a lot of very interesting data suggesting that acupuncture points and meridians had electrical properties, electromagnetic properties. And so that got me into understanding sort of the electrical properties of biological tissues. And really also at that time, connective tissue was believed to sort of play a role at acupuncture points and meridians. And so, trying to put the dots together, said, well, does the fact that electrical properties of connective tissue maybe can explain for what acupuncture points and meridians are doing in the human body, or what we're doing to interact with those structures. And so that was what my K23 grant was oriented around, in sort of studying. The title, I think, was The Biophysics of Acupuncture, the Electrical Properties of Loose Connective Tissue. I actually didn't think I would get it, but I was lucky enough to get that. And in order to really understand the electrical properties of the human tissue, that's where I took a number of courses at MIT, and really learned a lot about some of the interesting engineering principles that could be applied to biology. So I took that was like 5 years of the K grant. And after that, I got a R21 studying using a device that didn't touch the skin in order to study the electrical properties. It was a non-contact Kelvin probe. I got an R21 for that. And then subsequently that, I think I realized just how hard funding would be for acupuncture. And so I completely switched my interest towards actually understanding wearable data. So I started to work with data that you get from primarily from any type of continuous time series, whether it's EKGs, EEGs, motion, etc. And so I became sort of the associate director for the Center for Dynamical Biomarkers at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And that's where we applied a lot of interesting mathematical analytical approaches to physiological signals. And thankfully, a lot of the things that I learned at MIT could be applied to that work. So that sort of got me very much into the wearable space. And then I think Peter and I, being good friends, we continue to have discussions. I continue to have very strong interest in this whole systems understanding of the human body, but also trying to see if technologies could be applied to get a deeper understanding of what these principles mean, whether there's a mechanistic corollary that could be established with these technologies. And I think that sort of got me to talking about Peter, and then I think this led to this director sort of position.
Given that vantage point, how do you see integrative medicine as a field evolving during the course of your career?
I don't have the answers for that in detail, but what I do feel is that a lot of the integrated medical therapies, like traditional Chinese medicine, have concepts that certainly come from the perspective of the whole. Yin-yang balance, the 5 elements that I mentioned, that's missing from conventional medicine. And some of those principles are touched somewhat by the systems theory that's come out more recently in systems biology, and also in genomics and epigenomics, sort of the understanding that patterns emerge from interactions of components, but there's these complex nonlinear components. And I feel that there's still a lot that can be learned from sort of these integrative medical principles that come from the whole. The notion that the whole is more than just the sum of its parts. And that, I think, is where that integrative medicine has a lot to contribute to medicine, or health sciences in general.
And so you've spoken quite a bit about the research that you've conducted around the mechanisms of Chinese medicine, identifying acupoints and meridians. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but Hélène Langevin recently showcased some of your work at the SAR conference. So what significance do you attribute to this work, and where do you see it going now?
Yeah, I think it's a continued debate as to what the acupuncture points and meridians are. I think I worked with a team in China assessing basically they used fluorescent dyes injected into acupuncture points, and then these fluorescent dyes migrated along the meridian pathways, and then it sort of manifested at a second point down, sort of proximally down the arm. And that was the first time I was truly convinced that the acupuncture points and meridians were real. And it's because you could actually visually see it. And we also tried to image what structures correlated with these paths. And it turned so we demarcated where the paths were based on the fluorescent imaging. And then we went down to the ultrasound suite and did ultrasound imaging, and found that it correlated exactly with the intramuscular fascia that Hélène had identified. And that really, because that was the hypothesis a long time ago, and to see that, it correlated almost exactly with that fascia really convinced me that there was something there. In my mind, these pathways are a different type of signaling network pathway than just the classic neural pathways. And it may be that they all work together. I do think that the fact that the fluorescent dyes migrated along almost like these fluid pathways, because it migrated slow enough. It wasn't rapid. It wasn't like you injected into a vein and then it quickly went up to the blood vessel. It migrated like a few centimeters per second. And to me, it suggested that it was a fluid pathway that probably existed in these loose connective tissue. And then my guess is that it is not only a pathway for chemical communication, but it also has some electromagnetic characteristics. And if that's indeed true, then there could be these electromagnetic pathways in the body that we haven't yet identified. And what is the role? What are the mechanisms why these electrical, signaling systems? And I could practically spend a few hours just sort of talking about the various hypotheses and what mechanisms may play a role into that. And these were just to give a little bit a preview of that. There's a whole notion of something called electroosmosis and streaming potential. When fluid moves through electrically charged matrix or a vessel, you can generate a electrical potential or electrical potential gradient. So fluid flow in itself can generate some electrical signals, and that signals may have some implications in the body. So that I think is, again, this may not be something that we could evaluate in the near future, but that's an interest of mine that hopefully we could pursue in the next 5 to 10 years.
A big part of your work today is also around citizen science, correct? And so can you say a little bit more about that and what you're doing and how that interfaces with integrative medicine?
Yeah, I think integrative medicine has always had the belief that the patient should be at the center of of healthcare, but also that the patient has a lot more knowledge about their own body because they go, each individual has to suffer through or deal with whatever ailment that they may have from day to day out and understand their patterns better than anyone else. And I think integrative medicine was very early in identifying the importance of patient empowerment. And that I think that holds very true to me as well. What also integrated medicine also focus a lot on lifestyle, sleep, stress, physical activity, nutrition. That also played a strong role in sort of maintaining our health. And I think that aspect also interacted very strongly with the wearable work that I'm doing, just because the wearable technologies seem to have access into the window of a lot of those things that happen on a day-to-day basis. Sleep, stress, and sleep stress, physical activity, etc. So I am also a chief medical officer for a startup. It's called Labfront. And this Labfront interacts with device companies to make the data available from these devices to the users, and particularly for researchers. And as part of this process, I really strongly feel that this data that you get from the wearables should be made available to the users and the patients so that they could understand better, certain patterns, certain factors that can contribute to their health. And through this role as chief medical officer I think we are trying to really push on this idea of pursuing citizen science, having the citizens have access to that data, interact potentially with researchers, experts, clinicians who might have insights about, how that data can provide some window into, better health. So I think that is also a focus that I would like to really push at Osher. I certainly think that Osher has a very strong interest in citizen science. And I think looking forward to people who are also interested in this area to work with us. Well, I'm excited, first off, with a wonderful team that works at Osher. And, from Peter to Howie to Gloria, Darshan, and also with the integrative clinic under Matt Kowalski, and obviously with you, Atra, as well. I think the three big focus in Osher, nutrition or dietary,
Supplements.
dietary supplements, mind-body activity like mind-body medicine, and also planetary health. I think those are really great areas led by, a great team of individuals with some outstanding research and clinical and educational activities. And I think the opportunity to integrate a lot of those components so that we understand how each of these things work with each other. Like, how does nutrition affect the mind-body connection? How does planetary health or climate change affect nutrition? And there's all these opportunities that can interact with each other, and possibly having technology and also some of the biological mechanisms of the human body, and just any type of complex systems mechanisms could play a role in sort of understanding how these interactions between these big systems can operate. And I think that's where I'm really excited, the opportunity to work with all these great individuals, but also put together an integrative model of these big topics that are often not, that are often studied in isolation from each, compared to other fields.
Great. Well, look forward to that. And just turning a little bit more to a personal note, what motivates you directly in terms of the work that you do? What's your passion?
I think the biggest thing is I'm personally curious. I'm just a curious person. I'm always interested in learning something different and something new. I find that just doing the same thing day after day doesn't excite me. So as an individual, I find that I am just curious and willing to explore. But the other part that I really think I would want to sort of be part of my life mission is just to ensure that people have the opportunity to flourish, to succeed and prosper. I think my parents had some tough upbringing, and had some tough times, and sort of see some of the dreams that have been unfulfilled just because of the limitations physically, financially, socially, etc., that they've encountered. And I just hope that some of the lessons that we learn in integrative medicine could enable people to overcome some of these challenges, and really be people who are prosperous and really sort of enjoy a happy life. And to me, that joyful life, and that to me is sort of what drives me more than anything else.